Hi guys, it's the Forgetful Scholar, and this week 2 books. Well, sort of. 1 book and a DNF. So sort of. So I'm just gonna hop into the DNF and then we could get to the other book, okay? So this is the DNF. Burning for More, a Firefighter Romance by Kaye Kennedy. Ooh. Okay. Very nice cover. And I know, contemporary romance. Forgetful, what are you doing? You're so picky about those. I know, but I still want to find one that I like. So, and I was really intrigued by this one because I've never read a firefighter romance novel, you know, where the one of the people in the couple is firefighter. So I thought that'd be interesting. Plus, the author used to be a firefighter. So I was like, oh, we'll get some realism. That would be really cool. And I will say, the fighting part, like the fire part in the building, such a good scene. And I think this is why this book really pissed me off. Because there were so many sparks, so many parts that, like, if it was just reworked a little bit, this would have been a really fun book. You know what I mean? It definitely read like, maybe this is the first novel, I don't know, but it did feel like a first draft. So let me break it down a little bit. So the first scene, the female, her name is Autumn, and she's, okay, so the first scene, it's basically like in the hospital, her wanting to give up on existing because the author wanted to put a lot of mysteries into this book. Like, ooh, keep reading to find out what this is about. Like, too many. There's like 3. Her medical trauma, what her ex did to her to break her heart and shatter it, and how the hero of the story, his fiance died. It's too many. Stick with one. And I think the medical one was really important for the writer. It came off that way. So if they just stuck to that one, I probably, you know, it would have been a little bit more palatable. So, you know, she's in the hospital. She's about to give up on life. But the breathing machine keeps going because it's her fire alarm. Turns out she was sleeping on the couch. Now, with that scene, I got a little confused. I was like, was she in the fire and this is a flashback to the fire she was in and she's in the hospital? Or is she in the hospital and this is, no, or is she in the fire and the hospital was the dream? So the hospital was the dream, but it took me a little bit longer to figure that out. And that could have been on my fault too, because, you know, I'm an idiot. But I think if the dream sequence was like maybe a paragraph shorter, or, you know, when she woke up at the couch, like she woke up from a nightmare into another nightmare, like just kind of stating that she's awake now, clearly, I think that I wouldn't have had as much confusion as I did. You know what I mean? So, house is on fire. She's trying to get to this boy, Eli. She can't make it. She can't breathe. She can't make it. She runs outside in the attempt to go back to go get him. So that we get a little piece of who she is. She seems to be like being willing to run back into a burning building to save this boy. Okay. Brave, big heart. Got it. Okay, cool. I like that. I think that was a really good way to show her personality, at least a little bit of it, right? Like I said, the first chapter, so, like the first scene and stuff, so good. Anyway, the ENT's like, no. And then just by checking her heart rate, he knew that she had medical history of the ENT, so I'm assuming there's like big scars or something that, you know, ooh, shush, mystery, ooh. And I was like, I don't give a shit, get back to the fire, this is awesome, let's go. And then we're jumped to Dylan's point of view, and he's the firefighter. And that scene was so cool. And I had no idea there were different kinds of firefighters, like ones that go in the building and then the ones that pull, you know, do the hose. I thought it was just like all firefighters and they just divvied up the I don't know what I thought. I knew nothing about firefighters going into this. I feel like I learned a little something about firefighters even without finishing the whole book, which was super cool. Anyway, his scene in the fire was so cool and so well done. That's why I think I got annoyed as the story kept going, because I'm like, I know you could do good scenes. You opened with a really good scene. What the hell is this shit, right? So he finds a cat, saves the cat, puts the cat in his pocket like a little kitten, and then he saves the boy. Awesome, hero, brave, a little reckless because his partner that was going to the building with him left, like cleared the building, because when they put the fire out, like when they use the hose to put the fire out, it, you know, creates steam and they could cook alive. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. And also, yeah, that makes sense. Huh, fascinating, right? Right? Okay. He saves the boy. He thinks the boy is her son. Then that's quickly like, no, it's not. He realizes it like a second sentence after. So I'm like, why was that in there? Okay, that could have been chopped out. She's babysitting. The mother shows up. You know, she's so thankful. You know, the mother and the son go to the hospital. She's so thankful. And he's like, insta-lust. And I'm like, all right, fine. You know, it's not really a trope I like, but there have been books with insta-lust that I enjoyed. So I'm starting to like loosen up when it comes to that, right? As long as there's something that pauses the interaction for them to get to know each other, it's fine. But that scene of him like really intrigued by her and attracted to her and like, you know, is at odds with later on in the book about his like him being like a wounded hero because his fiance is dead. You're like, it didn't connect really well. Like it kind of gave the feeling of a disconnection that maybe the author wrote that scene, the fire scene and everything, and then left the book for a little bit and then came back and kind of forgot about that, or added the dead fiance later, because it doesn't really, because he's so heartbroken about the dead fiance Jenna, that he almost gets in a fist fight later on about it. So I'm like, wait a minute. So it didn't really connect. So that's like their first interaction. Okay. Let's see, what order am I gonna do this to show like the final straws till I was done? And I have to say, I stopped around page 80, around 70, 80, and this book is 280 pages, I believe. So I didn't get very far. I usually try, especially with indies, to go to page 100, but it just, you know, and the thing is, if it wasn't for that really cool fire scene and how well it was done, I think I would have stuck this out a little longer just to see if it got better. But since I saw that this author has some real talent with that, I just got more annoyed the more I was told and not shown. And like, that's an old adage, show not tell. And I get books are more show, more like a mixture of the two, but you're supposed to show more than tell. So that's why this book kind of felt like a first draft, where like every author tells more than shows in the first draft, and then, you know, they work it a little bit. You know, they switch out one sentence with 3 of descriptions and it works a little better and it's more, you know. So that's why this felt like a first draft. I digress, because I'm angry about this. Okay, so I'm gonna start with Autumn. Yeah, because the last straw was with Dylan, so I'm gonna start with Autumn. So, okay, devastating fire. She has nowhere to go. Her best friend's away on a work trip. Okay. She doesn't ever mention her parents, so I'm assuming that has to do with the hush hush. Ooh, medical emergency, medical history trauma. Ooh, that like, if it was just that, I would have been intrigued. But it wasn't just that. You know what I mean? There were so many other like, we're not gonna tell you. You have to keep reading. And I was like, I don't want to. I don't care enough. Bye. So anyway, she ends up at her ex-boyfriend's house, Drew. And I was like, oh boy, couldn't you like name him Andrew? Because this guy has a D name, main guy has a D name. I'm gonna get them confused. And I did. Because there wasn't enough description of either of them to have a standout personality at that part of the book. It could have changed later. I fully understand that, but I'm just saying to that point. And then it was like a whole, I haven't been here for a whole year till he broke my heart. And it doesn't explain, like it doesn't elaborate on it. There's not a conversation between them talking about what he did to break her heart, what led to that, like nothing, you know, except that she's like, oh, it's so comfortable. You know, like she kept sliding back into the comfort of being in a relationship with him and then chastising herself. Okay. Okay. And then later, Right, we're just staying with Autumn right now. So later, we're told, not shown, that Eli, the boy in the fire, is going to be okay. And I'm like, no, that would have been a great scene to show her personality. Like if she was in the hospital with Janet, Eli's mother, waiting on news, and she was so guilty that she didn't go back, and she's so happy that Janet and Eli are okay. Is there anything she could do for them? You know, that would have shown, okay, since she only had her ex-boyfriend to turn to when stuff got rough. So she doesn't have a lot of people in her life, but then she cares about the people that are in her life. That's what that kind of would have shown. But because that didn't happen, you just read like in a sentence that Eli was going to be okay, told in a sentence he was going to be okay. She kind of came off cold. Like if she didn't check on him, she didn't call the mom to see how he was. Sorry, water. You know, all that kind of stuff. You know, that's what the feel was. So I was like, oh, okay. For someone who was so heartbroken over not being able to go back into the building for Eli, it's weird that we don't get a scene of of her talking to the mother. Maybe that happens later. But in that moment, I was like, oh, she's kind of a bitch. And not like the fun kind. Like, what's happening here? That seems very, like, disconnected from the first scene we got with her. So I was a little confused. There wasn't a lot of not character progression, because I only read like 80 pages, but like steady character. Oh my God, brain fog. Hello, how are you? Like we didn't get a steady enough description or scenes telling us what the characters' personalities were. It was all over the place. You know what I mean? One minute they're really caring and sensitive, the next they're like cold and unfeeling, or at least that's how it comes off. So I was like, that's weird. That's weird. And then like she's like, oh, I can't believe I ran into him in the middle of Times Square. So weird. And I was like, what, Dylan, the hot firefighter you keep thinking about? No, it's her ex. Oh God. I was like, is this gonna be like a love triangle thing? Because you guys know how I feel about love triangles in romance. I find that it's more of a staple of fantasy and YA, and I find that it's kind of immature, and there's only been a very few amount of romance novels that do it well, and usually one of the people in the triangle is the evil villain, or it's like ends maturely, and that other person in the love triangle gets their own book and gets their own happily ever after. So I was like, and it's a delicate balance, because it can, at least for me, could come off really immature. So I was like, oh no, is this gonna be... Because I've seen that a lot in contemporary. They do the whole love triangle thing. And I'm like, no, this is not, we're not having this. No, you're not. So far, the first scene was good. The rest of it's, I'm not liking it too much. So I don't know if you can handle a mature way of doing this love triangle that's not going to come off as immature. You know what I mean? So I was like, uh-oh. And she agreed. She doesn't want to have drinks with him, but she agrees anyway. And I'm like, okay, flighty. But all right, if that's her character, if this is how we see that this is a character trait, let's go. Let's go. Let's do a flighty heroine. Let's do it, you know? Just something that's consistent. Consistent. That's the word. Okay. There's been no consistent character traits. Got it. Eventually. Anyway, so, you know, and they broke up a year ago, right? So this scene to me, where he's like apologizing for being an asshole, still not explaining what he did. And she's like, no, go screw yourself. I'm done with you. And like storms out of and walks calmly out of the restaurant, gets into a cab, pulls away, and he like bursts through the doors looking for her. I was like, when did this become a cheesy Hallmark movie? Because what the fuck is this? Like seriously, what is this? Like it seemed like more of an author wish fulfillment kind of a thing, you know, like really obviously. And I was like, if she calmly walked out of the restaurant, why is he like running after her as if she ran? Like it was just a weird thing. If he's not gonna, I don't know if he's in the book, if this comes up later, if it better, because that was such a ridiculously long, complicated, overdramatic scene for him not to be used later. And also, what's the point? And also, I don't care. Like that was, I was like, I don't care. All we got out of that scene is that she's flighty And her personality goes from one thing to the other in like 0 seconds. So I was like, what the hell's going on? You know, no consistency whatsoever. So that was one of the straws that broke the camel's back about the DNFing. Anyway, let's move to Dylan. So Dylan, we get like an info dump as he's driving to family dinner, about his father's dead, his high school sweetheart gonna marry her, Jenna's dead. You don't get why, because another secret. Ooh, don't care. He's at family dinner. He has three other brothers, all over 6 foot, all gorgeous, of course. And why is that a thing in contemporary romances? Hi, dog. Cue the doggo. Why is that a thing? Why, like in contemporary, I haven't read a book where like the big tough guy has a sister. Like what? Like why is it always other big tough strong brothers? Like what? Why is that a thing? Not that I'm complaining. It's just kind of a curious thing that I noticed. Anyway. The brothers start arguing because one of the brothers, they're all firefighters, and one of the brothers is sort of like the head of that fire station. I forget what he's called. Lieutenant? I don't know. Anyway, and he's like in his brother's face about being reckless, right? I guess one of the brothers was supposed to be seen as the peacemaker because he accepted Dylan's apology right away. And then, you know, the older brother said something about Jenna, like, oh, this isn't going to bring Jenna back. And then all of a sudden, boom, Dylan's in his face about to punch him, and they're like separated. I was like, what the? Like, there was no lead up to Dylan losing it. So, like, I was like, oh my gosh, red flag. I guess I have a red flag dance. I guess that's what that was. Anyway, so I was like, wow, that's kind of a red flag because he was contrite and then furious about to punch his brother, right? And the mom, the moment they started arguing, she left. And I was like, what? My mom would never have done that. All my aunts would never have done that. My sister would never do that. Leave her child to fight. Like, all my friends who have kids wouldn't do that. You know, all different kind of families. Nuclear family, divorced dad, widowed mom, and the mother's a widow, right? So I immediately connected it to my friend Sarah. And there's no freaking way Sarah would leave her 2 teenage boys or adult boys to physically fight and her not getting in the middle of it, grounding both of them. Doesn't matter how old they were. Like, no, Sarah would never. So I was like, that's odd. Is the mom just like a non-entity in this? Because like even adults, you know, your parents are involved in your life, not, you know, sure. But and I heard so many, like what? Julia Quinn had a great uncle/father figure in her book that was hilarious. You know what I mean? So like, what is going on there? Anyway, so I was like, oh, is Dylan a psychopath? Because is that the book I'm reading? Because I'll read that. You know what I mean? He just went from like contrite to violent really fast, and I was like, ooh, no. That's not good. And I think if it was reworked, instead of him just flying off the handle like that, maybe as his brother is berating him because his brother was worried, you know, maybe descriptions like fist clenched, jaw tightened, eyes narrowed, maybe having the brother that was a peacemaker, I guess, because the other one just wasn't even, he was in the scene, but he didn't do anything, right? Maybe be like, hey man, like take it easy, let's all calm down, before it escalated. So like showing that Dylan's temper was about to break, I think that would have been a little more, well, a little less red flaggy. And especially since he gets so touchy about Jenna. Meanwhile, like he was lusting after Autumn like 2 seconds ago. You know what I mean? So I was like, that's weird. And then, so that was another, like, ugh. And then in the firehouse, and I get what the author was trying to do, trying to show, like, locker room talk. But, like, romances are consumed, I would say, the majority, not all, but the majority of women. And locker room talk is not something where, I mean, myself and every other female that I've ever interacted with is not something that we like, appreciate, or want in, you know, a romantic story. Unless the guy's like, hey man, that's not cool, to show like maturity and like he's already protective of Jenna, even though they don't really know each other. Let me explain. Jenna drops off brownies to say thank you for not only saving Eli, herself, but also her cat. One of his fellow firefighters is like, oh yeah, you saved Autumn's pussy. And instead of being like, hey man, like, or getting in that guy's face because he has no problem doing it, like, hey man, be respectful, which I think a lot of the readers would have been like, oh, he's mature and he's protective of her, even though they don't know each other yet. Cute, shows this kind of connection. Right? But no, he gets turned on by that phrase, and I was like, what? And then later repeats that phrase to himself, and he's not like, ew, gross. Like, it just showed a moment of immaturity, and I was like, I'm done. I don't want, that's the straw. I'm done. I'm not having fun. I wanted to stick it out another 20 pages, but I'm like, because this author is capable of really good scenes. So the fact that the rest of it was not just pissed me off. I was like, this was a first draft. Like, I get it. Not everybody has money to pay beta readers. I get that. But like, someone in your life could have read it and been honest with you and been like, hey, maybe rework this a little bit. And that's what annoys me. It needed a little bit more of rework, and I think it would have been a really fun book. But, man, no. The moment he's like, Autumn's pussy, and not be like, hey man, knock it off. I was like, I'm done. You're an immature asshole that has no control of your temper. I'm done. I don't care. I'm done. You know, so I was like, whew. Well, I didn't mean to go 20 minutes on that, but there we are. Here we are, 20 minutes on that. So the second book is Sense of Honor. That's how I think of it when I look at it. And it's Julia Quinn, To Catch an Heiress. I think it's like the War Office, Agents of the Crown, Book 1. It's an older book, 1998. This is a 2-star. This is an FM historical. And it is a 2-star because you can tell this is one of her earlier stuff, her earlier works before she kind of learned or mastered, I should say, how to use her sense of humor and her great use of banter in her later books. Because, you know, the other books I read, I loved her humor, loved her banter. I thought it was a lot of fun. This one, it was too much. It was too much. Like, every paragraph seemed to have them arguing, which seemed more like arguing than banter. And it always seemed to be like there had to be something funny on every single page. It was just too much. It wasn't paced out. Because her other books, her later books, the humor's paced out really well. Great timing. The bickering or bantering came off more bantering than bickering, and it was greatly timed. They weren't like bantering in the middle of a heist like in this one. I don't even remember who the people's names are. Let's see. Blake and Caroline. So Blake is a spy for the British Crown, and he mistakes Caroline for a female spy against the British Crown. So he kidnaps her. She's fine with that. Because her guardian is trying to steal all her money, right? And by forcing her to marry his son. Now, the first scene, she thinks she killed Percy, who is the guardian's son, who tried to R-word her. So I'm not too upset. But he's alive, and he kind of like helps her to escape. The thing is, they were bickering back and forth while she's like making her escape with the guy that tried to R-word her. So when she bickers with Blake, it doesn't seem like their connection is why she bickers with Blake. She bickers with Blake. It doesn't seem like a connection. It just seems like that's just who she is. Which I was kind of like, oh man, you know what I mean? Because she's been through a lot. She's been through a lot of trauma. So if she always like internally bickered but never said anything aloud, and then when she was with Blake, she couldn't help herself and like fire back. I think for the reader, for me, it would have shown that she feels comfortable, that she doesn't fear him. Because he kidnaps her, and you know how she knows he won't hurt her? Because she could just tell. I was like, girl, no, you just shot a guy who tried to R-word you. You're still running high on adrenaline. This guy grabs you, ties you to the bedpost. You're telling me you're like, I'm perfectly safe because I could tell he's a good guy. No, you can't. You can't. In fact, the first time you saw him, he was like, oh, he looks like the most dangerous person I've ever seen. So the fact that you go from that to be like, I'm fine, even though he's tying me to the bedpost. No, girl, no. I was like, no. No, that does not read correct for me, right? And they bicker back and forth to the point where his friend is like, I'm tired of both of you. I'm going to London. You guys could just go F yourself. And I was like, oh, is he supposed to be like the reader? Because I feel the same, bro. I feel the same. Like, it was just too much. I think if, like, because if someone told her, like, if she pulled back on the humor, pulled back on the constant bickering, because it didn't feel like banter. It felt like bickering. I think it would have worked a little bit better. And Blake, like 90% of his like speech descriptions roared, growled, said through clenched teeth. Like he always seemed to be screaming at her because that was the description. And I'm just like, and Blake is the, again, his fiance died, closed off his heart, you know, slowly opening up to her and being all cuddly again. You know I love that trope. The big tough guy finding his emotions. I do. And this just annoyed the crap out of me. Because there was multiple points in a story, okay, you're stubborn. But then you're supposed to not be stubborn. You're supposed to have an epiphany, like an internal realization and come to that on your own. And there was like 4 places that could have happened until it actually did. And it didn't happen till like the middle of the 3rd act. And I was like, what the? Like, I'm so annoyed with everybody in the story. I don't care if you guys have a happy ever after. And that's not good. You know what I mean? And the only reason this is a 2-star, not a 1-star, because I liked Carolyn. I liked her character. I think she was a unique character to have as a heroine. Someone who has been abused and has had to kind of... She's a survivor. But she is a survivor. And I like that. I just think her tendency to talk back should have been held off for Blake and only Blake to show that she feels safe and not even, you know, realizing why. And like maybe when Blake roars, yells, screams at her, like her not being afraid and her being like, why aren't I? You know, kind of internally trying to figure that out. So this week was a bit of a disappointment. And I didn't mean to like rant on as much as I did, but here we are. So this one, I just think, you could tell it's an earlier book. You could tell Julia Quinn hasn't found her voice yet in this, but it's getting there. Because I really enjoyed her later novels. So there we go. I don't want to, but it's time for me to get back to the real world. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.